Hey, this is Giacomo Smith from Kansas Smitty's, and you're listening to Live at 5. Before we start today, I just want to remind you that we rely on your support to continue through this period. So remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel and click on the link in the description below to see where you can donate, sign up for a Smitty's membership, or buy our records and merchandise. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Hey there, we're live at 5 with Will Cleasby today, the drummer in Kansas Smitty's, the lead drummer, I should be specific. And we're going to jump into some music right away. This is Will playing along with the Oscar Peterson trio and Stan Getz. This is I Want to Be Happy. That's Will Cleasby on drums with the Oscar Peterson trio. He looks really young, but don't be fooled. He was around in the 50s. How you doing, Will?
I'm good. I've had fun recording those little video clips for you guys today.
Much getting more into fun than we've had watching them.
Yeah, I'm sure. Definitely.
Only joking.
Only joking. Yeah, no, it's that record that just played is a great one for drummers to play along to, just obviously because there's no drums, so you can kind of interpret what's going on in your own way, which is fun.
Well, that was something I was going to ask you about, because you know, when you're practicing swing feel, and like every day we seem to get questions about, you know, how do you practice certain things and how do you assimilate jazz vocabulary, and I guess I'd kind of direct that to you and say, how do you use records, and you know, how do you use records to practice, and how do you get a swing feel together and a sound?
So I've used records to practice since I started playing jazz, really, just because it kind of makes sense to be playing. In a way, you're playing along with like the greats of jazz. You know, you're in a band with them. Like, for example, that one I'm playing with Ray Brown and Oscar Peterson, which are like two of the greatest time feels and swing feels of all time. So like when you get put in that situation, you kind of have to join in with that feel and make it feel good. So then you're automatically kind of playing that feel. But like playing along with records for me is really great, because also it means you can, as a drummer, you can kind of get into the different drummers' swing feels and ride cymbal feels and things like that, and kind of be a chameleon and be Billy Higgins for one bit, or then go and listen to a Max Roach record and play along with that, and then you kind of being him for a bit, and then you go to Elvin Jones, which is something completely different, and you're kind of like trying to fit all the different types of swing feel, and then as a result of that you kind of develop your own thing, because you've got all these different things being thrown at you that so, then when it gets put in a mixer, it comes out in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're playing along with records, do you choose records without drums, or do you use things that have whatever all different configurations?
That Oscar one was actually the first one I played with without drums, I think.
Right. Okay.
But a lot of the time I kind of just pick like mostly whole records, or just a couple of tracks off a record of like I've heard an idea on it that I like and I want to try and get into it. And also when you're playing with the drums already on the record, you can kind of, once you learn what they're playing and you play exactly what they're playing, you can kind of hear why they've played it in a way. So it's like they play something and you're like, why has he done that? And then you kind of hear the piano's done something or whatever. You kind of get deeper into the record if you're like within it, playing in it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
And also like, what was I going to say? I've forgotten. I've lost my train of thought. But yeah.
Well, when you're looking at stuff like that, I mean, I know that together we've gotten into a lot of early jazz and kind of gone back and checked out things by Jelly Roll Morton and by the Kansas City style stuff, Benny Moten, etc. And then we did that John Kirby gig, and we've done a lot of 50s bebop stuff together. And then how do you bridge it all together, and who in the history of drumming, not necessarily just jazz, has inspired you in terms of like putting a sound together?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a hard question. Like in terms of like bridging all those different styles together, it is quite hard to do, especially those when I first started playing with the band, and we were driving up to that gig in Manchester, and we had like 6 hours in the car, and you were just playing all this music to me, and I was like, oh my god, this is so much information. And it's a lot of hard work to listen.
I think I remember your dad at one point saying, I'm just going to put talk radio on for like a minute because I need a little break.
Yeah, he kind of had enough. But yeah, it's like, it's really, when you go back to those earlier styles, because I started with kind of like 50s bebop, that's where I started, and then into 60, and went from there. And then when you kind of took me back to the 10s and the 20s and the 30s and took me through that progression, it makes so much more sense. The 50s makes so much more sense once you listen to what the guys were doing over those 30 years. And then when you get to like Tony and Elvin and those kind of guys that are kind of taking the bebop thing further, there's still so much from the 10s, 20s and 30s that they're doing it in their playing, and you can hear it. And once you have that, like that kind of knowledge of those eras and the styles of the way the guys were playing, it just like makes the kind of progression of jazz drumming really, really clear and obvious. Whereas like, I don't know, a couple times recently I've had younger people come up to me and like, oh man, I love what Nate Smith's doing or Mike Mitchell's doing or something. And I'm like, yeah, man, that's really cool. But I heard that on a, like 50s Max Roach record, that's where that comes from. And then he got that from this. And then you go back to like the earlier stuff as well.
Right.
So I think it's really important to have that kind of lineage of like at least knowing it, maybe not being able to play it because it's quite hard to like replicate those earlier styles. But if you couldn't know it and hear it, then it helps a lot in like getting your own kind of jazz style and jazz voice out, which is what you were asking about as well. Inspirational drummers in terms of getting their own voice as well. Jazz drummers, I think, obviously Elvin Jones is great. He's got his own vocabulary and own style and his own way of playing, and that's like, if you hear that, it's like, yeah, that's Elvin Jones. And then also Jeff Tame Watts is also great. He kind of took the Tony Elvin thing and took that even further into a different kind of realm, I guess. But just drummers in general, I get John Bonham's a great drummer who has his very own like specific voice with Led Zeppelin.
Who's a big Elvin fan as well.
Yeah, right? And you can hear that. You can hear that in the way he plays, definitely. And even though it's a bit controversial, I guess sometimes, but Ringo Starr definitely had his own voice going. You know, the Ringo swing. That's the thing. That's like. So you know,
if you say so, I'll have to stick with you on that.
But yeah, there's just so many great drummers that even the lesser known ones like Clifford Jarvis, well, not lesser known, but like I guess less famous, Clifford Jarvis, Mickey Roker, some guys like that, Ben Riley, like unsung heroes of jazz drumming that have their complete individual styles. It's just so much to get into that you kind of sometimes don't have enough time to get into it. Do you know what I mean?
Amazing. So we're gonna jump into a solo that Will's taken down from one of his favorite drummers. This is from Billy Higgins. And if you have any questions for Will or for any of us, just drop them in the chat. And here's Will playing solo from Billy Higgins with Stan Getz.
Happy State of Mind.
And that's Will Cleasby. You're listening to Live at 5. Remember to subscribe to this channel and to check the link in our bio to find out more about what we're up to. Will, what record is that from?
So that's from a Blue Note record called A Happy State of Mind by a piano player called Horace Parlan.
Oh, yeah, this guy. This thing.
Yeah.
That whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, he has that whole thing.
The kind of flat finger vibe.
Yeah, what's that about? I think he had some.
Maybe he had some hand issues, but yeah, I kind of
super swinging. Yeah,
I found that record a while back when I was trying to find drum solos to transcribe, and that drum solo I picked just because it's really nice. It's pretty simple. There's nothing too complex, and it just uses snare drum and bass drum, which is what I have set up in the house at the moment. So it kind of fit the mold perfectly for today.
Sweet.
Yeah.
The lockdown drum kit. You can.
Yeah, the lockdown drum kit.
You can buy a 3D print version of Will's lockdown drum kit.
Comes with T-shirt to damp the snare drum and everything.
You put on Instagram that you're selling transcriptions. Are you selling them?
Yeah, I kind of went through a big pile of paper that's all torn up that's been in my cymbal bag for years, and I was like, maybe I should go back through these and see what I've got. And I've got about 30 transcriptions. Philly Joe, Max, Art Blakey, Roy Haynes, that Billy Higgins one, some Ben Riley, a couple other bits, just of like things I've done over the years.
Cool.
So if anyone's interested in those, then just give me a shout.
Sweet. So I have a question for you that I know that you get asked often, and I think even though I know you're dreading it, I think it's actually really interesting, and I'll tell you why. Because I actually met by chance the film editor from this movie on a train that was canceled from Bath, and we were waiting for an hour on the platform. And I started talking to this guy, and I realized he was from the same kind of neck of the woods as I was. And so we started talking, and I said, well, so the movie is Whiplash, right?
Yeah.
So I said to him, I'm a jazz musician, and all the drummers that I know absolutely hate Whiplash. And that was, I think, probably the wrong thing to say to the guy who was the film editor on the movie, but he took it really well. I want to tell people out there, he took it really well. But I think it's interesting to ask a drummer, why. I mean, I think that is it's been, a lot of people who aren't musicians really love that movie. But why do musicians seem to dislike it so much? What's the deal? What's the problem with it?
I don't know. I've always said this. It's a good film. It's a really good film, but the way it depicts learning how to play jazz drums is really frustrating. And I think that's why musicians don't like it, because it's just really, it's like the way they portray conservatoire lifestyle and teaching at conservatoire is really not how it is. Obviously with the guy like shouting at his student and throwing stuff at him and things like that, and like all the my temp that you're rushing, dragging kind of thing. It happens, but it's not as extreme as that, It's like you've done that to me on a gig before, like, hey, you're rushing, let's, but it's not in that kind of way. It's just in a really helpful way that's not by being ridiculously over the top, which I think that's why people get frustrated with it. And also I think people get frustrated with it because, like you said, I get asked probably every gig I do, can you play Caravan? Have you seen Whiplash? Is the guy in Whiplash a really good drummer? Like, because people think, oh, jazz drums, Whiplash. Oh, he'll know about this. Surely he'll love it because it's a jazz drumming film. It's like, oh man, that's the 750th time I've heard that today. So let's not talk about it.
Exactly.
And that's why people are frustrated by it. Yeah.
Yeah. How many times have you practiced and had your hands bleed?
A grand total of none.
Okay. And I think the reason for that is, Will, that you're not practicing hard enough.
Yeah, I think that must be true. Yeah, hard or long enough. That must be it.
So there we go. Whiplash addressed. Darcy, do you have any questions or interesting comments in the chat today?
We actually have a question from Alec Harper.
Oh, what's he saying?
He is saying, if you could replace
Love that guy.
If you could replace the drummer in any group, which group would you play in?
That's a really good question. Does it have to be jazz?
He's going to say KC and the Sunshine Band.
I'm going to say no. I want to hear what rock band you want to play drums
I've got two answers here. If it was to be a jazz band, I'd want to be in the John Coltrane quartet, with the classic one with McCoy and Jimmy Garrison and Coltrane. I'd love to be Elvin Jones, basically. That would be great. Just because I love the way that those guys play and interpret music and how they kind of. I was my girlfriend showed me a video yesterday of a live version of My Favorite Things I hadn't seen, and it was just the most incredible thing. There was steam coming off Elvin because he was on fire. But rock band, I think, it's a tough one. I'd love to be in a band called Bombay Bicycle Club. If anyone knows those, they're a great band, like indie band from the mid noughties that have just got back together and released a record. And yeah, that would be kind of my dream non-jazz gig, just because it's music that I love and it's really fun, and I think I'd have a great time. I think I'd get on well with the guys in the band as well. We'd have a good time.
I would personally love to hear Will become the permanent drummer in Acker Bilk's septet. I think he would have really enjoyed it.
Oh no, I played with him once.
Now you're thinking of the Temperance 7.
Oh yeah.
We're going to jump into another piece of music played by Will. This is a solo brushes arrangement of On the Sunny Side of the Street, and after that we're going to talk about playing brushes in a jazz ensemble. This is Live at 5, and this is Will Cleasby on Sunny Side of the Street. That's Will Cleasby on Sunny Side of the Street. And I think I asked Will to play some brushes today because I think in an ensemble setting, he's a really sensitive accompanist, and he tends to use as many textures as he can out of the drums. And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, Will, but I feel like playing brushes is one of the lost arts of jazz drumming. How did you check that out, and why did you get into using that technique?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's lost, but it's definitely one of the more kind of complex arts of jazz drumming. And just as a disclaimer, I'd like to say in no way am I a master of it at all, and I wouldn't consider myself a master of it. I've got a kind of a basic rudimentary understanding of what can sound good and what doesn't with brushes, but obviously it's like that's something to work on, as is everything. But getting into it, I had a great teacher at Trinity, Dave Wickens, who sadly isn't with us anymore. But he was a genuine master of brushes, and he got taught by Philly Joe when Philly Joe was in London and stuff. Wow. So he had a lot of knowledge to pass down to me. And yeah, he was just the way he'd create sounds and textures out of the drum with just one drum with brushes was just like mesmerizing to watch. And I kind of learnt a lot from him. And yeah, it's a very, like I said, it's super complex and it's really hard. And it looks kind of easy because it's just like, you know, you're kind of just sweeping, but it's hard to get the right sound out of the drum that you want. And in the video that we just played, there's kind of different strokes. You can kind of go directly across the drum or round, like that's like stirring the soup, that one. Or
Right.
you know, you can make rhythms out of minestrone, that's the one. And then there's lots of different sounds you can get out of, like you can hit it with the tip of the brush, which is kind of a more harsh attack, or you can use the kind of full body brush, which is a fuller sound, obviously. Or, you know, it's like same with sticks. There's lots of different sounds you can get with the brushes, but it's definitely it's challenging, but it's really rewarding when it sounds nice.
Yeah, I think I didn't realize you said, you know, that it looks easy, and I didn't realize how kind of intricate techniques for playing brushes are until I stood over somebody playing it, because actually in the dimension of just looking at the drums, you can't really tell what's going on. It looks like you know, making an omelet or something. But when you're above somebody, you know, looking down on the head of the snare drum, when somebody's playing brushes, somebody who's, you know, like you, or I know Pedro Segundo is an amazing brushes player, and you know, there are a few people in London who really, Steve Brown is another one.
Yeah, he's great.
It's really a it's kind of you have a different sustain than you would with a stick, because you have this kind of like sweeping motion. And it's to me, it's, you know, one of my favorite, you know, I love listening to Joe Jones play brushes because it's such a personal sound. You can for me, I can almost tell a drummer more quickly, you know, to tell who they are more quickly from the way they play brushes than the way they play sticks, because it's just so much about all of the movements that you make. You hear every little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of, in that way it's pretty unforgiving, you know.
Right.
It's like, if, like you say, you can hear every little movement, because especially if you've got a nice head on the drum which has got texture to it, you can everything you do on that head is going to be like projected into the music, and it is pretty scary sometimes, especially got a nice new pair of brushes, a lovely new drum head, and it's like first tune brushes, it's like, oh man, this is going to be like, whoa, right into the deep end here. But like you say, when you do get the kind of the techniques going that make the nice sounds, then it's like really, really nice to play. And obviously it's a great way to mix up the texture in the music. Like both dynamically and sonically, it's a great way to like change things. And I found myself more recently trying to play them in situations where maybe you wouldn't normally play them, just to see how it sounds, you know, because a lot of the time, you know, you'll have a solo and it's really burning, and then drop out for a bit and then come back in on brushes, and then you build it back up, whatever. But like, or starting a tune with brushes is pretty common, and then going to sticks, or, you know, so I've been trying to kind of think of different ways of using them and in different situations, and how they, or like maybe not playing brushes on a ballad but playing sticks on a ballad, which is a different sound and makes it a different thing altogether. So it's just like thinking of when to use them and how to use them, I guess. But like I said, it's a challenge every time you pick them up.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a really cool idea, you know, not treating different feels in jazz and different tempos as just kind of boilerplate things. You know, if you play, you know, I can think of, you know, the kind of Jamie Aebersold school of jazz is like, if it's slow, it's a ballad and you play brushes. If it's a bass solo, you play brushes. If it's like, you know, all those kinds of boilerplate, just run of the mill.
This is what you should do, and this is the rule. Yeah.
Right. That all kind of goes out the window when you start playing with a band and you start playing night after night, and you think, well, actually, this needs something else. And you know, that's kind of the last question I have for you is, you know, when you play with bands, how do you get inside somebody's head as people? You know, how do you become responsive in the band? Do you kind of meet people socially and get a feel for the kind of person that they are? I know that I do that a lot, and I kind of think of their personality. Or do you listen to them and you think, oh, well, that person's checked out loads of Wayne Shorter, or that person's checked out loads of Miles, or that person's checked out loads of this, so they probably want me to play like this? Or how do you kind of get to know people musically?
I think both those things are really important. Getting to know people socially is super important to, especially because, you know, sometimes you get put on a scratch gig and it's with guys you don't necessarily know or haven't really played with, and it's like, it's cool and it's fun, but it's not as happening as if it's like with two of your best mates who you've hung out with loads and you know each other really well personally and also really musically. Then that's when it's like really happening. So I think definitely getting to know people personally and what they're like as a character is important, because, you know, music is expression of the self. So like, if someone's got a certain character, that's gonna definitely kind of feed into the way they play, which you need to be aware of. And also, like you said, you know, knowing each other musically and what your influences are is really important. You know, especially with Smitty's, it's great because it's like, well, you'll have written a tune or something and you're like, oh, this is who I was listening to and this is a reference. And if everyone knows, if those collective references are there, then a lot of time saved and a lot of like music can happen quicker than if it was like, oh, I don't know that. And it's like, I know what you like to listen to, you know what I like to listen to, we all know what Alec likes to, you know, there's lots of different things, and it's good to all be aware of those things to actually make a nice musical setting, as opposed to like, oh shit, I haven't checked out that, and but what's it's like, you know, you can say to me like, this is the vibe I want, and I'm like, oh, this, like that drummer or that style, or and you're like, yeah, that's the one. You know, totally. It's like it comes back to having, like you said at the start, having the kind of musical vocabulary, musical knowledge. It all has to be there in order for things to work as smoothly as possible, I guess.
Definitely.
Like not just individually, but collectively as well. And I think the collective is always more important than the individual, especially in jazz music. I think that's like key.
Totally. Will Cleasby, Darce, do we have any more questions in the chat?
Yeah, there's a couple that have come through. Just jumping in on that conversation there, actually, one of the questions is, how long did it take you to settle into Smitty's, having come in a bit later than some of the other guys? And, you know, what did you learn over that period, and what are you still learning now?
Okay, that's a really good question. Now? It'll be 3 years in May, I think.
Cool.
That's a good question, and it's one of my favorites to answer because I love the band. It was, wait, just repeat it one more time for me, Das. Just one more, like just the whole.
Yeah. So how long did it take you to settle into Smitty's?
Settling it, yeah.
After having come in, you know, later than some of the other guys, and what are the best things you've learned in that period?
Okay, so settling in was actually really easy, and it took, like, we drove up to Manchester for the first gig with Giacomo in the car and my dad. 6 hours in the car, got to know Giacomo really well. It was great. We were late. We missed the first set, which the guys were not happy about.
Oh my God, I forgot about that. So we literally walked in and watched our band play. Okay, it was so amazing.
This was my first gig.
Total Tom Sawyer moment. It was like,
yeah, this was my first gig, and I was like, oh my God, like, and so we walk in, and the first thing I meet is these guys like kind of giving Giacomo an earful because he was late to his own gig. And so in the break, I was a bit like, Christ, this is good, you know. And then we started playing, and it just kind of felt really natural, and it was great. Obviously, I played with a couple of the guys before, but not everyone. But it was still just really nice to, like. It was definitely different to what I'd done before, but it just felt really normal. So I say it was easy to settle in socially, especially, but musically it took some time. You know, there was gigs at Ronnie's and stuff, and Giacomo would be like, yeah, we're going to play these tunes, and then we get on stage, we play one of them, and then he'd just turn around and start playing something else that I'd never heard. So Ferg would have to be like, Ferg would be playing, he'd be like, stop, no, don't do that, no, stop. You know, it's like there was a lot of kind of working things out on stage. That's okay.
Wow, that's really exciting though. That must have been such a huge step up for you to like basically learn your trade on stage.
It was a massive step up, especially like playing with guys who are a bit older than me, much more experienced than me, and had experience of playing like that kind of music. You know, that was a big learning curve. And speaking of like learning things, I learned a lot in early days, especially a lot of tunes, lots of early tunes, different ways of playing in a band. You know, like accompanying people in different ways, stuff like that. But still learning playing with the guys, because it's like they've. You know, it could be the most killing gig in the world, but Ferg's always got something to say, or Giacomo might have a little point to make. You know, there's always things to learn, and I appreciate that because it's the only way you get better is by learning. So, yeah.
That's great. What's the best record someone in the band has recommended you?
Oh, there's so many.
What's one that comes to mind?
One that comes to actually, I was asking Giacomo about one a couple of days ago, which has kind of stuck with me since we kind of learnt it and played it. It's the Mary Lee Williams version of Stardust, part 2.
That is a heavy record.
And it's
really a special one.
Yeah, and it's influenced one of our new pieces that's going to be on the new record, which is great. Dream Lane, isn't it, G?
Which Darcy actually named?
Yeah.
Hey, Darcy. Yeah,
that's my claim to fame.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the records that sticks out. I remember first hearing it, I was like, man, this is so deep and so like it's crazy. And maybe just Pete sent me some great records over the years, but there was a live Monk one with like a nonette on it or something when he was doing his Monk things, and that was a great listen. So yeah, but there's I mean, in our group chat, there's Giacomo constantly used to send me like, hey, check this link on Spotify, hey, check this link on Spotify, hey, check. So,
I used to send you all kinds of weird like world music stuff.
Hey, what was that? Two-Way Packaway. That's a great one as well.
Yeah, that's New Orleans Funk Volume 3. Darce, you know that one. That's
Love
clean
that
up
record.
music.
That's clean up music. That's Saturday night music at the bar.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's one that sticks out definitely. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we have one more tune from Will. But we're going to leave you with that and then leave you today. You've been listening to Live at 5. Remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel and click the link in the bio. And as always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Thanks, Will, for joining us.
What's this tune called, Giacomo, for those listening at home?
This is Tour de Force.
Tour de Force.
That's French for tour of force.
1, 2, 3.
Thanks again for listening to Live at 5. Remember to subscribe to this channel and click on the link in the description to see where you can donate, sign up for a Smitty's membership, or buy our records and merch. See you tomorrow. Thanks again.